It was the red light above the elevator door that gave it away. Blinking, watching, recording. And still, I let him put his arms around me like I didn't care who saw. God, I cared. I cared so much it made my skin buzz just remembering it. But in that moment I was burning too hot to care. He wasn't supposed to be there. We weren't supposed to be alone. And I definitely wasn't supposed to let my body melt against his like that. But elevators do something to people. They shrink the world down to 4 metal walls and a humming silence that seems to erase rules. It started earlier that afternoon. I was in heels, late to a meeting, the kind of late that makes your pulse flicker at your throat. The elevator doors were closing, but he caught them with his hand. Smooth, calm, too confident for someone in a corporate office. He stepped inside, nodded at me, pressed the button for 18. I didn't speak. Not then. But I felt it. That strange electricity. Like our bodies were already in conversation while our mouths stayed silent. He smelled like something expensive. Leather and heat. Not cologne, not quite, more like the memory of a night you weren't supposed to have. His tie was loosened just enough to make you think he did it for someone. The doors closed. We rose. He glanced at me. Not a full look. Just a flick of his eyes like he was checking if I was real. I felt it all the way to my stomach. That elevator was always slow. Too many floors. Too many stops. And this time? Jerked. Hard. Lights flickered. We stopped between floors. Great, I muttered, reaching for the emergency button. He was calm. Too calm. Happens more than you'd think, he said, and leaned back against the wall. Like he wanted it to happen. I stepped to the far corner. Distance. Safety. But it didn't last. Because then he said something that made me forget how to breathe. You always tremble when you're nervous? I blinked at him. Your hand, he said, his voice soft like it was only meant for me. You're gripping your purse like it's going to float away. I laughed. Too loudly. Too fast. I hate elevators, I said, though that wasn't true. I hated what I felt in them. Trapped. Seen. He tilted his head. Maybe it's not the elevator. Maybe it's being stuck. With me. I should have looked away. Should have said something clever. But instead I just stood there, letting the silence bloom between us until it wasn't silent anymore. Until it was charged. Then that noise. A soft chime. The elevator jolted and started again, humming like nothing had happened. We were moving. But I wasn't breathing. We hit floor 17. Then 18. The door opened. Neither of us moved. He stepped closer. Not touching me yet, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of his chest. He looked at me like he was asking a question with his eyes. I didn't answer out loud. I didn't need to. Because then, like something unspoken had snapped, he put his arms around me. Not a casual hug. Not a polite one. A hold. Tight. Slow. Intimate in a way that made my breath catch. My cheek grazed his collarbone. His hand slid to the small of my back. I should have pulled away. I should have remembered the camera. 'Cause yes, it was on. Blinking. But instead, I leaned into him. And the red light just kept watching. The hallway outside the elevator was quiet. Too quiet for 5 p.m. on a Wednesday. I stepped out first, hoping the air would cool the heat still rising in my chest. It didn't. He followed. Close. And for a moment I thought maybe it was over. That whatever impulse had gripped us in that stalled metal box would dissolve under fluorescent lights and corporate ceilings. But when I turned the corner toward the conference rooms, he was still behind me. His gaze heavy on my back like a second skin. And then I saw it. The door with the little brass plaque. Observation room 4B. It was ajar. Just enough to feel like an invitation. I need to. I mumbled without finishing the sentence. I wasn't even sure what I was pretending to do. Check equipment. Look for someone. Hide. The room was dim. Long glass mirror on one side. A table. 2 chairs. And one red light in the corner, much like the one in the elevator. I couldn't tell if it was on. I stepped inside. And then I heard the soft click of the door closing behind me. He hadn't gone back to his floor. He was here. With me. Again. My breath caught. I didn't turn around. Just stared at my reflection in the mirror, trying to look composed when my heartbeat felt like it was echoing through the walls. Why did you follow me? I asked, my voice too steady to be honest. He didn't answer right away. Instead, I felt the air shift, the space between us pulling tight again. His voice was low when he finally spoke. Because I wasn't finished. I turned. Slowly. He wasn't smiling. Not smug or cocky like someone chasing a fantasy. He looked serious. Almost conflicted. And that made it worse. Better. I couldn't look away. Tell me to leave, he said, but it wasn't a challenge. It was a lifeline. And I couldn't take it. I stepped back, just once, and felt the edge of the table behind me. His eyes flicked down to my lips, then back to my eyes, and he exhaled like he'd been holding his breath since the elevator. He closed the distance. Still not touching me. Just standing so close I could feel the heat between us thicken like fog. Do you always do this? I asked, suddenly needing the upper hand. He tilted his head. Do what? Make people forget they're being watched? His smile was a slow, dangerous thing. Only when I want them to remember it later. That was it. That was the crack. My fingers curled around the edge of the table behind me. My knees weren't entirely steady, but I held my ground. I wanted to touch him, pull him in, see how far this spell would go before it shattered. But I didn't. Not yet. Because waiting had started to feel better than having. We stood there, not moving, not speaking, just breathing in a rhythm that felt too synchronized to be accidental. Then a buzz. Somewhere behind the mirror. A flicker of something. A sound I couldn't place. My stomach turned. Is that thing on? I whispered, eyes darting toward the glass. I don't know, he said. But his voice. It didn't sound surprised. You've been here before. He didn't deny it. And suddenly it wasn't just desire crackling between us. It was danger. Temptation with teeth. And I'd never wanted anything more. I didn't sit. Neither did he. We stood in the middle of that sterile, too quiet room, as if a single movement would tip the scales one way or the other, toward sanity or surrender. My back still brushed the table. He was in front of me, so close I could smell the heat on his skin, feel the electricity that seemed to radiate from his chest in slow, pulsing waves. Everything about him was composed, too composed. But his eyes betrayed him. They scanned me like a man trying to memorize something he feared he'd never see again. I swallowed hard. We should leave. He nodded slowly. We should. But neither of us moved. Instead, his hand came up, not to touch me, but to hover. Just beside my shoulder. Close enough that I felt the warmth, the possibility. My breath caught. His fingers trembled slightly, just once, before he withdrew them. You don't even know my name, I said. I know what you sound like when you hold your breath. His voice was quiet, almost reverent. I know how your body leans toward mine when you're trying not to. Isn't that more intimate than a name? It was. God help me, it was. My lips parted, but I didn't say anything. What could I say that wouldn't break this spell? That wouldn't reduce it to something ordinary? He stepped closer but still didn't touch me. His restraint was unbearable, cruel, erotic. I need to kiss you, he whispered. But not until you ask me. I exhaled shakily, my knees brushing his. My body was betraying me. Pressing forward in tiny, involuntary movements. Heat coiled low in my stomach, tightening, deepening. I should have pulled away. Said something rational. But logic had left the room with the last flicker of fluorescent light. I didn't ask him to kiss me. But I leaned in. Just enough for him to feel it. And that was all it took. His hand came up slowly to the side of my face. Not rushed. Not demanding. Like he was afraid I'd vanish if he touched me too fast. His thumb hovered just below my cheekbone. And when our lips finally met, it wasn't frantic. It was devastating. Like a confession without words. Like the moment before a storm. His mouth moved against mine with a quiet intensity that made my whole body ache. I felt myself dissolve into him. Hands finding the edges of his shirt. Fingers curling into fabric like I needed something to hold on to or I'd fall through the floor. His breath was warm, staggered, and when he pulled back just slightly, it wasn't to end it. It was to whisper. There's no audio in this room. I blinked, dazed. What? The camera behind the glass? It records video only. No sound. How do you know that? His smile was the slowest one yet. I told you. I've been here before. Every part of me froze. Not in fear. In realization. This wasn't chance. This wasn't accident. Was this planned? He didn't answer. But the silence between us said everything. I should have walked out right then. Should have straightened my blouse, pushed past him, and left that room like none of it ever happened. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because his silence wasn't guilt. It was invitation. And the most terrifying part? I wanted it. What do you mean you've been here before? I asked, my voice lower now, hoarse from restraint. He didn't blink. I told you. Some elevators stop. Some doors open. I just know where they lead. You brought me here. Not exactly. But I didn't stop it. That truth sat between us, heavy and seductive. I stepped back, needing air, needing clarity, but my back hit the mirror instead. Cool glass, solid against my spine, while he remained the only thing warm in the room. His reflection hovered just behind me, a shadow I couldn't shake. Are you going to tell me your name now? I asked. His mouth curled. Does it matter? It shouldn't have. But it did. Because I suddenly realized how far I'd fallen into this moment with someone I knew nothing about. Except how it felt when he looked at me like I was the only thing in the world that made sense. Still, he gave it to me. Quietly. Elias. It rolled off his tongue like it belonged in a story I hadn't read yet. Is this what you do, Elias? I asked. Lure women into empty rooms and kiss them like they're secrets? His jaw tightened, just enough for me to see something flicker behind his eyes. Only the ones who look like they're trying not to be seen, he said. Only the ones who seem just as lost as I am. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to call him out for the manipulation, the setup, the danger of it all. But the truth? I hadn't felt wanted like this in a long time. Not admired. Not flirted with. Wanted. Like I was the story someone had been waiting to tell. I reached for the doorknob, unsure if I was leaving or just grounding myself. My hand shook. Elias moved behind me. Closer now. So close I felt his breath at the curve of my neck. You think this is about sex, he said. But it's not. I could have kissed you in the elevator. Could have touched you when the lights flickered. But I waited. Because I wanted you to choose this. My fingers froze on the door. I don't know what this is, I admitted. I don't even know why I'm still here. He leaned in, voice brushing against the shell of my ear. Because you're more afraid of being seen wanting it than you are of wanting it. That hit something deep. Too deep. And before I could respond, his hand slid around my waist. Not urgent. Just grounding. Steady. As if asking again, are you still here? I was. And that's when he said it. Soft. Deliberate. Dangerous. There's a playback room on the second floor. I turned to face him. What? If the camera's on, someone might have seen what we did. Or they could. Later. My throat tightened. My mind raced. Shame, thrill, temptation, panic. You said there's no audio, I whispered. There's not. His gaze dropped to my mouth. But I remember what you sounded like. My heart thundered. You're not helping, I breathed. I'm not trying to. And then the hallway outside creaked. A voice. Distant. Footsteps. Someone was coming. We weren't alone anymore. There's a particular kind of silence that happens right before you're discovered. Not peace. Not calm. It's tight. Loud inside your chest. Like your heartbeat becomes the only sound in the world. And even that feels too loud. That's what I felt the moment the footsteps echoed just outside the door. Elias didn't flinch. He looked at me, really looked, and then quietly reached over and slid the lock into place. The soft click made my stomach drop. What are you doing? I whispered, stepping back from the door. His voice was calm, careful. Buying us a few seconds. Seconds. That's all we had. There was a shuffle of voices in the hall, muffled through the door but unmistakably close. Too close. I could almost make out a name. Maybe two. Probably security. Or IT. Or worse, someone from my department. I spun toward the mirror. My own reflection stared back at me. Flushed cheeks, wild eyes, hair a little too undone. The kind of face that told stories no one had asked you to tell. I can't, I started. But Elias was already beside me, pulling me gently toward the table. His voice barely touched the air. Sit. I froze. Why? Because if they open that door, you'll be sitting. Like you're waiting. Like nothing happened. Like this was just a room. I obeyed before I realized I had. The chair was cold under me. Too straight. Too sterile. I folded my hands, tried to steady my breathing, looked down at my shoes like they held the answer to all of this. He stood by the mirror, leaning with one shoulder against the wall, arms crossed. Effortlessly nonchalant. God, he was good at this. Too good. The doorknob rattled. Once. I stopped breathing entirely. A pause. Then a knock, soft, tentative. Like someone testing the air inside the room. Anyone in there? Male voice. Professional. Dry. Elias raised his brows at me, then turned toward the door. Occupied. He called out, bored. Pause. We're checking the wiring. Should be quick. Elias didn't move. Room's in use. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Another pause. We'll come back later. Silence returned like a slow exhale. The footsteps faded. The hallway emptied. And I was still gripping the edge of the chair like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to the ground. Elias turned to me, smiling softly now. See? Seconds. I shook my head. You could have gotten me fired. You could have walked out. I still can. You won't. He was right. And I hated him for it. Because beneath all that fear and adrenaline, I was still burning. I stood. Slowly. Let the blood return to my legs, my voice, my nerve. You're dangerous, I said. He smiled wider, eyes dipping over me like he was memorizing the moment. Not yet. I stepped toward him, one breath at a time, until we were eye to eye. No more games, I said. I wasn't playing. You lured me here. I followed you. To a room you knew had a camera. And you stayed. That landed like a pulse between my ribs. I should have walked out. Right then. Instead, I reached for his tie and pulled. Just enough to make him stumble forward. Just enough to let him know I was done pretending I didn't want this. He didn't kiss me. Not yet. He just whispered. The playback room is still open for another hour. And everything inside me went still. Because I didn't know what terrified me more. The idea that someone had seen us. Or the idea that I wanted to go see it too. I told myself I was just going to leave. That I'd walk out of that room, straighten my jacket, head back to my floor, and pretend none of it happened. But my legs didn't move. My body didn't listen. Because Elias had tilted the world. And I wasn't ready for gravity to return. He watched me. Calm. Unshaken. You want to know? He said quietly, stepping beside me without touching. If the light was on. If it caught everything. I don't. You do. And maybe I did. Not out of vanity. Not out of shame. But because part of me wanted to see what I looked like when I gave in. When my mask slipped. When I let my body speak a language my mouth never dared to. 5 minutes later we were in the stairwell. Not talking. Just breathing. Each floor we passed added another layer of tension. I could feel it like fabric pulled too tight over skin. The quiet echo of our footsteps. The shallow rhythm of breath. The almost unbearable proximity of his shoulder brushing mine. Second floor. He pushed open a steel door with a key card. Not his, I realized. Someone else's. Borrowed. Stolen. I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. The hallway was lined with nondescript gray doors, each one labeled with a number and a black security strip. He stopped at one. Room 213. Inside, a monitor glowed. Elias flicked on a small desk lamp. The room smelled like electronics and cold coffee. The kind of place no one lingered in unless they had something to hide, or something to uncover. My fingers tightened around the back of a chair. What exactly are we looking for? He slid into the seat, fingers tapping the keyboard with unsettling precision. Elevator 3. Today's timestamp. Observation room 4B. No audio, just motion-triggered footage. Easy. He found it. I saw myself. Saw us. 2 figures in a box of chrome and shadow. My body language betraying everything I tried to suppress. The way I leaned toward him without realizing. The tension in my hands. The moment the lights flickered. Then the hug. God. Watching it was worse than living it. More vulnerable. More. My breath hitched when I saw the way I'd folded into him. Like I belonged there. like I had been waiting to be held like that for years. He didn't say anything. Just let the footage play. Then the scene in the observation room. It was grainy, dim, but clear enough to see how close we stood. How much we said with nothing but breath and space. The almost touch. The lingering stares. The way he leaned in, how I didn't pull away. We watched the moment before someone knocked. How I froze. How he didn't. I turned away from the screen. I can't, my voice cracked. I look like you wanted it. I looked at him ready to snap. But his face wasn't smug. It was soft. Almost reverent. There's nothing wrong with that, he added. You think there is, but there's not. I swallowed hard. You said you'd done this before. He nodded slowly. I have. How many times? His eyes met mine unwavering. Never like this. And for some reason I believed him. The screen looped behind us, a quiet, glowing echo of something intimate. Something private that no longer was. Can it be erased? I asked. Yes. Will you? That depends. On what? He turned to face me fully now. On whether you want this to be the end, or the beginning. My heart pounded. You're insane. He smiled. And you're still here. The glow of the monitor flickered behind us. Somewhere deep inside me logic screamed to run. But another part whispered, stay. Stay and see what happens when you stop being afraid of being watched. I'd never felt so bare with my clothes still on. The room was dim, quiet but humming. The monitor behind me kept playing the same loop, me unraveling in slow motion, frame by frame under surveillance. I could hardly look at it now. Not because I was ashamed. Because I wasn't. And that terrified me. You don't erase something like this, Elias said softly behind me, as if reading my thoughts. Not when it meant something. But to who? I turned to face him. To you? Or to whoever's going to find that footage next? His jaw tensed, eyes flashing with something deeper, hurt maybe. Or guilt. To both of us. My throat tightened. I don't want to be a fantasy, Elias. You're not. Then what am I? His silence was louder than any answer. I stepped away from the screen, away from him. My heels clicked against the tile like accusations. I didn't want to hear what I already knew, that I had crossed some invisible line in my own rules, that I had let something bloom in a space designed for secrets and shadows. And still I didn't leave. Tell me the truth, I said, quieter now. All of it. Why were you in that elevator? Why me? Elias leaned back against the desk, arms crossed like holding onto something steady. His voice came slow, measured. The first time I saw you was last month. Lobby. You were waiting for the elevator, fidgeting with your necklace. You looked like you wanted to disappear. I blinked. I watched you for 10 seconds and felt something I hadn't felt in years, he continued. So yes, I waited. I learned your schedule. I got in that elevator on purpose. There it was. No more pretending. I should have felt violated, objectified, but I didn't, because there was no calculation in his voice, just hunger. Longing. Maybe even a kind of madness I recognized in myself. I'm not someone you can just watch, I said, my voice trembling. I'm not some beautiful secret. I know, he said. That's why I couldn't just watch anymore. He reached for me then. Not suddenly, not forcefully. Just held his hand out, open, waiting. I stared at it. My chest was tight. My skin felt electric. Outside this room I had a life. A desk. Deadlines. A reputation built on order and control. But in here I was made of nothing but heat and hesitation. I placed my hand in his, not because I forgave him, but because I wanted to be seen. Really seen. I want you to erase it, I said quietly. But only if we promise this doesn't end here. His eyes searched mine and something in them cracked wide open. It doesn't have to, he whispered. And that's when the monitor behind us blinked. New footage. Live. I turned slowly. There, in grainy resolution, us standing together now. Hand in hand. Watching ourselves. The camera was still rolling. We weren't just the past anymore. We were the present. Exposed. And somewhere in that dizzying, terrifying realization, I smiled. We didn't move. We just stood there, staring at our own silhouettes on that screen, two figures caught in the act of surrender. Not to each other, not even to desire. To truth. There's something terrifying about being seen in real time. Not remembered. Not imagined. Seen. You said there was no audio, I whispered. There isn't, Elias replied, voice steady. But what would they even hear if there was? The silence. The hesitation? He turned to me. The wanting. My pulse throbbed in my throat. Outside that room, the world was still waiting. The inboxes. The meetings. The rules we both pretended to follow. But in here, everything was too loud to ignore. The blood in my veins, the heat in his stare, the echo of what we hadn't done but already felt. I looked at our hands still intertwined. His thumb brushing mine like a silent reassurance that this was still real. Do you believe in fate? I asked. He laughed softly. No, but I believe in timing. And this? This is good timing to you? No, he said, stepping closer. It's terrible timing, but that's what makes it real. We kissed again, not because we had to, not because the room demanded it, but because the truth had nowhere else to go. It was slower this time, deeper, not rushed like the first. This was a promise disguised as touch. My hands curled into his shirt, grounding myself. His fingers slid up to cradle the back of my neck, holding me steady like he knew I needed anchoring. We didn't hear the hallway anymore. Didn't care about the camera blinking in the corner. For the first time, we weren't performing. We were becoming. When we finally broke apart, breathless and quiet, he touched his forehead to mine. What happens now? I asked. He smiled, small, unguarded. Now we walk out there and let the world guess what just changed. I let out a breath that felt like a beginning. And we did. We walked back into fluorescent lights, into voices and footsteps, into the endless thrum of ordinary life. But everything was different. Not because someone might have seen us, but because we finally saw ourselves. I don't know what happens next. Whether we fall in love or fall apart. Whether this becomes a secret we keep or a story we tell. But I know what I felt in that room wasn't just heat. It was recognition. And sometimes that's the most intimate thing of all. So, would you have watched the footage? Would you have stayed? Tell me in the comments. I want to know if you choose curiosity or control. And if this story made your pulse race just a little, don't forget to like, subscribe, and come back for more. Because some desires, they never stop at the elevator.